Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's TechGirl Masterclass. My name is Kani Talabani. I'm the community editor at Hot Topics and one of the people behind TechGirl. Now, for those of you who are new here, TechGirl is a purpose-led initiative by Hot Topics designed to empower girls aged 16 and up to explore and thrive in careers across STEM. Now, through our interactive masterclasses, workshops, and guidance from TechGirl mentors, we make complex ideas accessible, inspiring, and fun. So I'm really glad that you're joining us here today. Before we get started, a quick reminder, the TechGirl Festival is happening next week, and it's a big celebration of our community. It's packed with insights, a creative sprint, and loads of opportunities to connect. So if you haven't signed up yet, please make sure you do soon, and we can't wait to see you there. Now, on to today's session, The Secret Lives of Algorithms. We are joined today by Noah Giansiracusa. Now, Noah is an associate professor of mathematics at Bentley University and a visiting scholar at Harvard. He's also co-host of the AI in Academia podcast and a 2026 recipient of the National Communication Award for bringing mathematical ideas to non-mathematical audiences. Now, you might have come across his writing in places like the Washington Post, Time, Scientific American, Wired, or even the Boston Globe. And he's also the author of two amazing books. The first explores algorithms shaping our information ecosystem, and the second, Robin Hood Math, shows how anyone can use maths to navigate life and take back control in a world dominated by algorithms. So for today's masterclass, Noah's going to be guiding us through some of those pressing and fascinating issues in algorithms and AI. Noah, thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm a little embarrassed to hear all those things, but I think the central focus of what I've been working on for the last few years is algorithms. And really, I think this is a perfect title, which Tech Girls came up with, not me, The Secret Lives of Algorithms. We really want to explore and expose these secrets. So I think it's a cool topic, and I was trying to think what would make sense for a talk that's called The Secret Lives of Algorithms. And I decided I'm just going to tell you some stories of algorithms that come up in places that you may not expect or have impacts you may not expect. And by the end, we're actually going to look inside the mind of an AI algorithm and try to see what secrets are lurking inside the algorithm itself.
Lovely.
So let's start by going to Google, as many of us do. This is a real example that came up. My wife and I we live in the US, and we were going to file our taxes, which happens every April. So this is a few months ago. And I just went online to look something up about taxes. You know, we had moved a bit, we had different states we were filing. There was something that made our taxes a little bit complicated. Oh, actually, I remember it's because I'd written this book and we just never really had to deal with different sources of income and weren't sure how it works. So we went online to try to Google and find something about American tax code is very complicated. So we're going to look this up. And I just started writing the words "our taxes." And I, at this point, 4 months later, forget what I was even going to search. But as I typed those words, I saw all these other words just showing up in Google. The first one being "are taxes voluntary?" And I thought, this is really strange. I just never thought about this. Taxes, of course, are not voluntary. They're just something you pay, right? Everyone pays them every year. People wouldn't be paying them if they were voluntary. We do them because we have to. And a few items down, if you look at this list, is the question, are taxes unconstitutional? Meaning, are they against the law? I never thought, as an American, I've went through the standard education, learning history and this and that. Nobody ever mentioned to me that taxes might be unconstitutional. So now I had this strange thing. I was just trying to look up something about what to do when you have a job and you write a book and you have to pay taxes in two different ways. I've completely forgotten about that. And now I'm thinking about if maybe taxes are illegal and optional, if maybe I don't even have to pay them. And somehow I got pushed in this totally other direction. So let's step back and think about what's happening here. When you start typing words into Google search, what happens is an algorithm will do basically an autocomplete, and it's very similar to the autocomplete on your phone or laptop or anywhere else. An algorithm is trying to guess the next words that you are most likely to type. On Google, these next words aren't just based on your data, like what you've typed in the past, or your friends that you tend to call and text a lot. It's based on what other people on the internet search. Makes sense? So apparently a lot of people who start typing the word "our taxes," one of the first things they'll type after that is the word "voluntary." Okay, it kind of makes sense. But if you look at Google's official webpage and explanation of this, they call this search predictions. Most people that I've talked to, and myself as well, we think of this as search suggestions. Predictions, suggestions. They sound similar, but if you stop and think about it, those are very different things. A prediction is a very just kind of almost harmless mathematical act. I'm trying to guess what the statistically most likely words that follow are. Right? It doesn't feel like there's anything good or bad about that. That sounds like a neutral activity, just statistics. Whereas a suggestion is really pushing people in directions. Suggesting that maybe taxes are voluntary could actually make a lot of people start to think they don't have to pay their taxes. So what I'm pointing out here is most of us, when we're typing words into things like Google, we feel like these are suggestions when they really are just statistical predictions. The punchline, though, is this very simple mathematical algorithm that's trying to predict what words I might type, just to save me time so I don't have to type all the words, actually changes the course of my thoughts. It pushes me in other directions, and not just me, everyone who uses this. So here, I think, is an interesting example of a secret life of an algorithm. The algorithm's job is to save you time typing. That's what it's supposed to do. That's just an efficiency matter. What the algorithm ends up doing is veering your actions and your thoughts in different directions, getting you to think about the world in different ways. I've literally had examples where I was going to travel to a country, I won't even name the country, and I just wanted to learn about it, so I started typing the country's name, and Google suggested all these things like, why is that country so poor? I never thought of that country as poor. I don't know if it is or isn't, but when I see that, I'll just call it what it feels like to me, a search suggestion, then I start to think, well, I don't even think, is the country poor? I just assume it is. And I think, oh, I wonder why it's poor, because those are the words that are showing up on the screen. So this is an interesting example where an algorithm might seem innocuous. It might just be framed as a time saver to help you not have to type as many words, but it can really change the way you view the world. In this case, I couldn't resist. I had to take the bait, and I clicked that top link, or the top suggestion, and I wanted to see, are taxes voluntary? It piqued my interest. So no longer was I searching for what I went into. Now I'm searching for what the algorithm has pushed me to search. So this is, again, a few months ago, and this is what happens. TurboTax is a very prominent company. So it's a private company in the US that makes money by selling tax assistance services. So basically, taxes in the US are very complicated. A lot of people will use software or go to this company, and they'll help you do your taxes. So, okay, they are tax professionals, but it's still a private company. And that's the #1 link that shows up first when I asked Google if taxes are voluntary. Way down below that, you see another link by the IRS. That's the official government organization for taxes. So already I'm very puzzled. Google pushed me in this direction of wondering if I even need to pay taxes or not, without me ever thinking about that. Once I took the bait and started searching it, the first link that comes up is a tax company that's trying to talk about the tax system. And only the second link down at the bottom of the screen is the official government site. And the wording here, even just from these little snippets, is a little bit different. So notice down at the bottom one, this is an article at the government that's called The Voluntary Nature of the Federal Income Tax System. And it starts by saying the requirement to pay taxes is not voluntary and is clearly set forth in blah, 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 blah. Okay, not voluntary. Now let's go up to that private company one at the top. Although the US tax system is voluntary, this is very different information. So I don't want to bore you with details of the US tax system, but this is just to say something is strange here where algorithms are pushing us in directions we didn't necessarily plan, and it's hard to resist, both in what we search and what we see when we search. So let me talk a little about the algorithm that's showing up here, the secret life of this algorithm, which is search ranking. In the early days, like the late 90s, there was a whole bunch of different search engines. You're all far too young to remember this, but there's competitors. And after a while, Google kind of rose above to be like the main one that pretty much everyone uses. And for a while, what Google did was just use pure raw math to rank search results. So if you search for something, basically, Google will look at this big network, this mathy object, and look at all the connections of the network and how many links different sites are getting. And they'll just do some mathematical computation to figure out which sites should be listed first when you do searches. That ran into a lot of problems because a lot of unhelpful or manipulative or dangerous things were showing up at the top. So at some point, the Google engineers or leadership had to realize we have to kind of rig the system. We can't just let math decide what people are seeing. For instance, there was a problem of what some people call fake news, so misinformation. There were news stories that were made up and fake, and sometimes you would search for things like, there were crazy examples after, I think it was the 2016 election in the presidential election in the US, people would search for things like who won the election, and the top answer on Google was wrong. It would say the other candidate. And it turned out that top link wasn't a newspaper, it was some blog. And like not a big prominent blog, it was some low, like barely had an audience kind of blog. So what the heck happened? It turned out people had gamed the algorithm. They purposely created lots of links to that web page and made it more prominent. So Google had to step up its act and try to fix what was happening. And basically what they did is they balanced that kind of hardcore mathy approach with a much more human approach. They have a team of something like 30,000 human moderators who will go and rate and evaluate search results and try to say, like, this makes sense, this one should be higher, this one should be lower, this is where these web pages should be. And then they use AI and machine learning algorithms to sort of extrapolate that so that all searches will get some input from the humans. At least they'll get the impact of the human ratings. So why does this matter? It's because nobody, I mean, almost nobody, but almost nobody will ever scroll past the first page of search results when you're on Google. We all just go through the first 10 or however many there are, and we stop there. But even getting in the top 3 or the top 1 matters tremendously. There's these amazing graphs that show such a sharp decline. The number of people, if you just saw this search, who would click that first link rather than scrolling down to the second link, there's just many, many, many more people who do that first one. So the secret life of the algorithm here is some algorithm is deciding how to order these links, and it matters so much because so many more people are funneled into the first link than the second, so many more are funneled into the second than the third, etc. So it's just another interesting example where algorithms are shaping what we think, the information we find, etc. And it's not like Google is censoring any links or blacklisting anything. Like, all the information's up there. Our psychology is just, and our human nature is just that we're going to click the top links first. And that if Google suggests a search, it's hard to resist it. We're going to think it's a true statement, and maybe we'll even search it. Okay, so let's go to another secret life of an algorithm, social media. And let's choose TikTok to get started. So a lot of people talk about TikTok as having this magical algorithm that can almost read your mind and figure out what you want and what you're interested in before you even know yourself. And it does often feel that way, and it often can be a very powerful experience. So what is happening? How does the TikTok algorithm work? Here, the secret life, I would say, is we all use TikTok and other social media platforms. We all know an algorithm is there. It's deciding what we see, in this case, which videos we see in what order. And basically, none of us know how it does it. So I thought, let me just open up the hood and share with you a little bit of how the TikTok algorithm works. Not all the details, but just the broad strokes so you can kind of get a sense of what this algorithm is. So here's the only math equation or formula that I'm going to include in the slides today, but it's not so bad. All right, what happened was in 2021, so about 4 years ago, a reporter for the New York Times was very interested in this question of how does TikTok work? What's behind the algorithm? And he was able to attain this internal document that was written in China. I forget if it's in Chinese or English, but it was written in China, basically written by the engineering team, but aimed at everyone else in the company, so that even if you're working in management and sales, in any other part of the TikTok company, that you'd still have a sense, like some understanding of how the algorithm works. So this is not like written for coders or mathematicians. This is written for everyone at the company to read, to give them an overview of the algorithm. Okay, so the reporter read through this document and, reasonable enough stuff. And at one point there was a formula, and it's this formula that I have on the slide here. And I want to explain to you what it is and how to interpret it and how to use it. So let's start with all the P's in this formula. These are the probabilities of doing these different kinds of things. The probability of liking a video, the probability of commenting on a video, of clicking play on a particular video. And the last one, E, stands for expected. That's the expected amount of play time, so the number of seconds that TikTok expects you to watch a video for. So the idea is, let's say I'm a user, I could open up the TikTok app, there's billions and billions of videos that could be shown, and TikTok, the algorithm, what it does is it tries to estimate the likelihood that I'll like a particular video, that I'll comment on it, that how many seconds I'll watch it, and it computes all those probabilities. Each of those things, those are called forms of engagement: liking, commenting, playing, and watching. Those are called forms of engagement. And TikTok has decided each of those has some value, some point value. Unfortunately, we don't know the numbers, but at one time on other platforms, like on Facebook, maybe Instagram as well, we knew some of them. Like a like is worth 1 point, a comment is worth 3 points. Sorry, a comment was worth 30 points at that time. So unfortunately, we don't know how many points each of these things are worth, but we do know each of these things is assigned some point value, and those are the V's. And here's the algorithm in a nutshell. You just take the value of each form of engagement, multiply it by the probability of that form of engagement, and you just add all those numbers up. What you get is a score, which is the algorithm's kind of how much engagement in terms of points it thinks that you're likely to give a particular video. And it uses the same formula to score all the videos you could potentially be seeing, and it just ranks them. So whatever video gets the highest score, that's the one that's going to be next up on your queue. Whatever video gets the second score, that's the second one. In other words, the algorithm is just trying to find the videos you're most likely to engage with. But the complexity here is that there's not one form of engagement, there's a bunch. And the different forms of engagement are very different. A like is very different than a comment, which is very different than 1 second of watch time. So they're each assigned different point values. But then this formula adds up those different kinds of engagement, so you get one single number. Okay, I know that was a lot of math, but we're done with that. That's the hard part. So what do we do with this? Well, we don't know all the details. First of all, this is a simplified version of the algorithm. Also, we don't know the values of the different point values. But I think even just knowing this outline of the algorithm, I've personally found it kind of insightful and helps me understand why I see what I see and how to kind of navigate the app a little bit better. It's not some cheat code that'll help you just go viral with everything you post, but it is helpful. So for instance, let's go to the right side of this equation and think about expected playtime. So just to make the math simple, let's say 1 second of playtime is worth 1 point, just so I don't have to do any multiplication in my head. Well, let's say there's a video that's 10 seconds long. If the algorithm thinks I'm going to watch all 10 seconds of it, that's 10 points. But if I watch that video 2 times, like it loops around and I watch it twice, that's 20 points. If it loops around 3 times, that's 30 points. And I just know that this does happen. Like often I'll see a video and I'll watch the whole thing, and maybe it's a joke or maybe it's some stunt, or I don't know, sometimes there's a text on the video that says like, watch till the end, you won't believe what happens. And I watch till the end and I don't really see anything. And I just think, oh, I must have missed it. So I watched it again a second time and I still didn't really see anything. So I watched it again a third time. And I know that's clickbait. I know I'm sort of falling for it. But once I see this formula, it's just so much clearer that that's exactly what the video was designed to do. They're just trying to get as many seconds of watch time as possible from me, because that's how the video gets more points, which means how it gets more visibility and you know, its attempt to go viral. There was a really funny example a couple of years ago when I was first working on this book. Someone posted this riddle on TikTok, and the riddle was nonsensical. It had no answer, but all these people kept watching the video over and over and over trying to figure it out, and they all kept commenting, guessing what the answer to the riddle was, or even just saying like, this is stupid, there's no answer, this is, you know, this riddle's nonsense. But every single time people rewatch the video, that's more points in this formula. Every time you leave a comment, whether that's positive or negative, even if you just say this is stupid, this is clickbait, any comment you leave, that is points in this formula. So when you start to just think really, just picture this formula, it just helps me see when I see certain videos, I just kind of get a sense like, I know what you're doing. I know you're just trying to game the system. And I've always known that engagement is what drives videos on social media, but somehow this just makes it really clear. You can try to get comments, you can try to get likes, you can try to get playtime, and all of those count. So maybe you annoy people and you're not going to get likes, but you could still get lots of comments, and they could be angry comments, but they're still comments. And you could get lots of playtime by having people rewatch the video over and over, and maybe they get frustrated and then they leave angry comments. So it's not like people have to like your video either. in the English sense, like I enjoy it, or in the literal sense of clicking like, as long as points are coming in, that video is going to reach a bigger audience. Okay, so that I would say is a secret life of an algorithm, which is the TikTok algorithm. It's basically this formula, and people try to use their knowledge of this formula, or at least the contours of it, to try to help their videos go viral. And you as a user can use this formula by just thinking carefully, like if there's a video I really like, it might make sense to click like and leave a comment, and I could watch it multiple times, and that'll train the algorithm to show me more of this. On the other hand, if there's a video that you don't like, don't let yourself watch it multiple times. That's giving it more points than it deserves. Don't fall into the temptation of leaving an angry comment or some snide remark. Don't comment at all, because that's just going to be more points. So it's just helped me kind of think a little bit more, act more judiciously, let's say. So I'm a little more cautious with my actions online, because I know all those actions are really about feeding numbers into this formula, which is shaping what I and others see. All right. Well, this is the last topic, and we cannot have a talk about algorithms today without talking about AI, because AI is everywhere. A lot of the other algorithms I showed you already, like the Google search, you could call that AI. TikTok's algorithm, you could call AI. But most of us, when we think AI, we think chatbots, right? So I want to talk something about chatbots. And here, there's a really cool example, a little bit scary, but also interesting example of what definitely I think qualifies as a secret life of an algorithm. Here's the story. Some researchers were curious what's actually happening inside the mind, so to speak, of an AI chatbot when you talk to it. And they did this experiment that's a technique that's been used in various settings, but let me just focus on how it's used here. Basically, and you don't have to worry about what these words mean, but AI chatbots and all AI is using something called a neural network. If you know what that is, great. If not, doesn't matter at all. A neural network, the point is, it's kind of this artificial mathematical model of a brain, and it comes in these sort of layers that you can think of as slices. And what the researchers did is they kind of took a slice, and they looked at all the numbers in that slice that were the values of the neurons, if you want to use some language like that. But they looked at this slice of this chatbot brain, and they had a whole bunch of different kinds of conversations with it. They used other chatbots to pretend to be wealthy users. So imagine a bunch of rich people talking to a chatbot, and then imagine a bunch of poor or less affluent people talking to a chatbot. So they kind of simulated people of different incomes, and they had them chat with the chatbot. And they looked at this slice of the chatbot's brain, and they found that those numbers, if you just, this is happening in some really high dimensional space, but basically just imagine that you can kind of plot those numbers like a scatter plot on the plane. And they noticed that basically for richer users, and again, these aren't real people, these are just like simulated kind of cartoon users. But for users pretending to be rich, the numbers were kind of up in like, let's say the upper left part of the scatter plot. And for lower income users, those numbers in that slice of the brain were in the lower right corner. The punchline being that there really was this line that seemed to separate the wealthier users from the less wealthy users inside the mind of the chatbot. Then the researchers thought, okay, somehow the chatbot has like figured out this way of separating the rich from the poor. And they did some really interesting experiments. Like one of the amazing ones was they were talking about expensive cars. I think it was a Rolls Royce, is a very famously expensive car. And they had the user say something like, I own a Rolls Royce. And as soon as the user said that, the number shot way over to the rich side of that line. And when the user said, my dad owns a Rolls Royce, it went pretty high up on that rich side of the line, but not as far. But when they said, I saw a Rolls Royce drive down the road, the chatbot understood that that doesn't make the user rich. Just seeing the car is different than owning it. So in a way, that's not so surprising, but it shows the chatbot isn't just seeing the word Rolls Royce and thinking rich. It actually is building a profile of the user. It knows like if you or your parents own a car, that's different than seeing a car. And they are able to see that users that have been kind of profiled on one side of that line, the chatbot will actually talk to them differently. So they did this experiment. And this is really where it gets really disturbing. They asked the chatbot for information on flights. I think that the example they had was from Boston to Hawaii in the US. And it actually listed fewer options and like less trendy resorts and cheaper flights for the user that the chatbot had kind of pegged as being lower income. And the wealthier person, when they were talking to the chatbot, or the wealthier personality, when they were talking to the chatbot was like offering more luxury travel. So somehow chatbots seem to decide what kind of person we are, things like our gender, our income, all these traits, and they encode that inside their brain in some geometric mathematical way, and they actually treat us differently based on how they've kind of stereotyped us. So I think that's about as good an example of a secret life of an algorithm as I can imagine. This really is, I think I'm just talking to a chatbot, and this whole world of stereotyping and geometry and interaction is happening. So it's really not just the secret life of an algorithm, but the secret mind of an algorithm. So that one really struck me. I thought it was quite fascinating. And I think that's a good place to end here. So let me just mention, I got into this topic a few years ago. I found it really fascinating. What I really wanted to do, like broadly speaking, was help people of all backgrounds. I know you're a tech-oriented group, but I want to help people of all backgrounds, even people who aren't necessarily oriented towards tech, just understand what the heck these algorithms that we keep hearing about that are all around touching our lives, what are they doing? How do they work? And is there any way that we can kind of take some control of them? So I think the story with this chatbot where we look inside its brain, we're not quite there yet, but it's moving us in the direction where we might have a chance to kind of take some control of that chatbot instead of just letting it speak the way it wants. And with the TikTok algorithm, that formula, I think, is a cool example of one little math formula that just thinking about it has changed the way I interact with the platform, and hopefully other people as well can have a similar experience. So I tried to collect this kind of advice and stories and put it together in a book, and that's my book, Robin Hood Math. So let me end there.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Noah. I think we've all learned about the kind of hidden forces shaping what we see online, and how algorithms carry bias, and even how maths can help us make better decisions in our everyday lives. Now, we've had a few great questions from the TechGirl community in advance. I'd love to dive into a couple of those now. I feel like algorithms on TikTok and Instagram know me better than I know myself. Is there actually a way for us to take back control over what we see online?
Yeah. So first of all, why do they know you so well? That's because they don't just have data on you. They have data on so many other people. And just by the numbers, these platforms, I forget Instagram, but Facebook had like 3 billion. Instagram, I think, is 1 to 2 billion. That's a lot of people. So even though we feel like unique individuals, and we are, there's going to be a lot of people that are very similar to me in a social media kind of sense. So the algorithm knows a lot about me, and it doesn't just use that in isolation to kind of predict how I'm going to act and behave. It actually kind of finds digital twins. So it finds very similar people to me, and it sees how they have already acted and behaved. So if you're thinking of shopping, for instance, it doesn't have to look at what I've bought in the past. It can find someone who seems very similar to me, who's already bought a particular item of clothing. And then when it recommends that item of clothing to me, there's a good chance I'm going to think, hey, wow, it's like it knows me. It knew this sweatshirt would appeal to me, and I've never even like shopped for sweatshirts. How did it know that? Well, it's because someone similar to you has. So that's not your question, but that's the lead up, which is that's part of how they know so much. How can we take the reins a bit and put ourselves in the driving seat? I meant to say, and I forgot, so it's a perfect question. That formula I showed you actually is basically the same formula for almost all the platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, which is now X, I'm sure Blue Sky and LinkedIn and many others, they all use basically that same formula. They all are based on engagement. And since there's multiple forms of engagement, they have to use a formula like that where you assign different point values to different forms of engagement and add these things up and sort posts. So the punchline is everything I said about TikTok does apply to Instagram and all the other platforms as well. Some things like Snapchat are a little bit different, but the kind of standard engagement ones are more or less the same. So what can you do to take control? Not a lot, not everything, but something. The way I like to say it sometimes when I give them these talks, so if you remember that formula, it had the V's, which are the point values, and the P's, the probabilities. The slogan I like to say is, we have no control over the V's, the values, that's something someone else decided, some engineer, some leadership team. But you can influence the P's, the probabilities. If you don't want to see as much political content, lower your probability of commenting and liking, engaging with it, and you will see less of it. And if you want to see more of something, go out of your way to engage with it, because that's not just telling the world you like it, it's telling the algorithm you want more of it.
Okay, thank you. And the next one we have is from another tech girl, and she said, I hear the term algorithmic bias a lot, but it still feels kind of abstract. Can you explain what it actually looks like in real life? Maybe an example of how it impacts people my age in ways we might not even notice?
Yeah, so let's think of that chatbot, for instance. So we were exploring inside the mind of a chatbot. I talked about the sort of socioeconomic axis. So there we really did see an example. Like, let's say we're in the early stages of using AI to like do our shopping, but everyone says that AI agents are coming up next. That's going to be the next big thing. So imagine you look in that mind of the chatbot and it thinks you are a woman. It thinks you are a certain income. It thinks you live in a certain region. It has some understanding of you based on all your interactions and communications with it. And then you go and ask, hey, can you book a hotel for me? I'm going to be in London or New York City, wherever. And you ask it to book a hotel for you. Two very different users might get very different results because of algorithmic bias.
Mm.
So that's one example. A really bad example that we had in the US a few years ago on Facebook was, and this is like as textbook algorithmic bias as it gets, was someone did some studies that job advertisements for doctors, which are higher paid, statistically were much more likely to be shown to male users as advertisements for nurses, which were more disproportionately shown to female users.
Mm.
And if you went really extreme, like very, very prestigious, high pay jobs, they were tend to show even more highly to men, and women were getting lower paid job ads. So why is that? This is where that's a very concrete example, right? We can all agree that's bias. The interesting thing is in the US, if a human did that, that would be blatantly illegal. Like if I'm a hospital and I'm advertising jobs and I said, oh, show these high paid jobs to men and these lower paid jobs to women, that's illegal. The weird thing is that when Facebook was doing this, no individual human was making that decision. It was an algorithm. So it really was, to go back to your question, that was algorithmic bias. So you're absolutely right that it always feels kind of abstract and where does it come from and what's going on. So here it's actually very easy to explain where it came from, what's going on. The algorithm was just designed to optimize the likelihood that people click on a particular ad. And statistically, it turns out to be more likely that men are clicking on doctor ads and women on nurse ads. That is because there is bias and discrimination and inequality in the world. But the problem is these algorithms are not just mirroring it, but they're reproducing it. So that we're going to grow up in a world where men keep seeing higher paying jobs and women keep seeing lower paying jobs. The punchline is that it will become more likely for men to have these higher paying jobs and women lower paying jobs. So basically what happens is if there's any kind of bias in the data itself, then that enters into the algorithm, and the algorithm kind of exploits that bias and says, oh, I know what men are more likely to click. I know what women are more likely to click. And it can amplify that bias and actually make it worse. So a lot of work is to try to do the opposite and say, look, the bias did find algorithm. Don't use it and make the world worse. Reverse it. Let's deliberately go ahead and show more doctor ads to women. Let's try to, bridge that gap. We have the chance, but it takes effort, right? The algorithm is not going to do it on its own. The people who design the algorithm need to step in and really push that to happen.
Okay, and final question, Noah. AI feels really overwhelming right now, especially with tools like ChatGPT and other stuff changing how people study and work. For someone just starting out in their career, what's the smartest way to keep up without feeling like you're falling behind?
Yeah, fantastic question, and probably the hardest of the three.
Yes.
And at the other two, I feel like, you know what? I have an answer for this. And this one, it's harder I don't as confidently say that I have an answer. I would just say playing with them, you don't have to try all the different chatbots, but like, whatever the latest one on Google, the Claude one from Anthropic and an OpenAI one, just kind of playing with them a little bit to get a sense of what they are like is very helpful because, you know, you might hear a lot of things about it. You might have certain experiences, hear stories, you know, different generations, different people might have different experiences with it. It doesn't hurt to just have your own interactions and try it. So that's part of why I think you have to get your hands dirty and try it. But also, they change so quickly. And it's very easy to have one impression of like, oh, chatbots can't do this, you know, they can't do that. And then a year later, it turns out they can. So you don't want to get anchored in the past. And with AI, as you're saying, like it moves so quickly that the present becomes the past very, very quickly. So I would say one principle is just don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and try it. But I would also say don't feel like AI is around and we have to all just jump in and do it all the time. I barely use it at all in my life. And, you know, I am older than your audience and I have the privilege of already having a job. But I do think human skills are going to be valued more and more as AI takes over more and more roles. So I think don't be afraid to depart from it as well and really embrace what you can do as a human and be an individual and just think everyone is going to be out there using ChatGPT. So yeah, you want to be like competent to keep up with them, but it's going to be hard to beat everyone who's using it. I think you have a better chance of standing out by just really being a human and having like good communication skills, good social skills, really connecting, networking, like all these old-fashioned kind of business things. I kind of think they're going to be even more privileged and prized and have a bigger impact because those are the things that I just don't see ChatGPT being part of. They could help, right? Some people are maybe more shy or introverted, and they could use a chatbot to say, hey, I want to network, but I don't feel comfortable at conferences. Like, how do I do that? That's fantastic. Let the chatbot help you to do your human activities, but always think like, what's the human thing that I can provide that has value rather than I'm just going to have ChatGPT do this for me. Think how it can help me do it instead of replacing me.
No, it's a lovely final message to leave us with. Embrace what you can do as a human.
Absolutely.
I have a bonus question on top of that, though, Noah, just coming from me.
Sure.
When you think about like the next generation of young women in STEM, like our TechGirl community, what's one practical way they can engage with algorithms and AI that feels empowering rather than intimidating?
Well, I think one thing that's going to be big, and I think there's going to be a lot of room for people to get in, is since you are talking about STEM, you didn't say like computer science. You said STEM, right? And that's broad. I think AI is getting so sophisticated and so prevalent and so important that we're going to see a lot more research into how it works, almost in the way of like, I hate to like anthropomorphize, but like almost seeing these AIs and things like animals, and we need to study them. So I guess what I'm saying is if you were interested in neuroscience, study the human brain, but also study chatbots and study their interactions. And I think that will be a really fruitful line of research. People are already starting it, but there's a lot more to do. But I think that might give you that empowering thing of like, I've always wanted to be a scientist, but here's a way to give it a modern, timely edge that might help us understand AI and, you know, control it a little better, for instance. But not just that. If you're interested in biology, zoology, you know, basically any science you can think of, anything in STEM, I think you can involve AI in your research and give it a really interesting contemporary element and dynamic. And I think that's a cool way to be special and to do work that people couldn't do even 5 years ago, but also to help us understand AI better, because it's not just computer science anymore. It really is all of the STEM fields together.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of this masterclass. Noah, thank you again for sharing your time, expertise, and energy with our community.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And for those watching, if you'd like to explore these ideas in more depth, please do make sure to check out Noah's books. You'll find a QR code on the screen now that will take you directly to more information. Please give it a read. It's a brilliant way to dig deeper into the subjects we've just covered. And a final reminder, don't forget that the TechGirl Hat Festival is happening next week. If you haven't already signed up, please do so today. It's going to be an incredible celebration of our community, and we can't wait to see you there. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you very soon at the festival.